Okay, welcome to Hopeifiers. My name is the Acapellist. With me is Brother Scott Sweeman. How are you tonight, Brother Scott?
I am good despite the weather and everything else. I put on a Japanese background, a little bit of drawing that I find interesting to give everyone a feeling of interest tonight,
It
I
looks
think.
very nice. Looks very nice. It looks like all a cherry wood kind of thing in a bar or a restaurant or something or a
Yeah, this is an alley of bars, restaurants, snacks, that kind of stuff. It's a drawing though, but yeah, it's good.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well, it's
Been
very
been
nice.
down lots of little alleys like that and found some great little food, but yeah.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, kind of overcast, kind of an evening with a little bit of mist in the air. I thought that'd be good for today.
That's a good one. By the way, we put out a Facebook post, saying about does weather impact our
Hmm.
hope? And we had two people respond. Donna, our friend Donna, said,
Hmm.
"Yeah, I was hoping to go for a walk, but that hope dissipated when I looked outside." And Corolla kind of had a similar thing. She was hoping to ride more horses today, but she hasn't quite had it in her. So I think that
Oh,
for all of us, I think we're probably somewhat affected by weather, aren't we?
well, the science on that is what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Okay.
But when I dove into it, I was just really blown away about how much we need to talk about. So I'm proposing that we actually split tonight's talk into three parts.
Woo!
So yeah, it's like there's a lot there. So I think tonight we're going to talk about, let's just talk about the basics. Does weather affect your mood and hope and positivity and those things?
Okay, so
There's some,
weather and if does it affect hope? That's tonight. And
yeah.
then what's your plan
And
for next week?
next week, I want to talk about how climate change and severe weather conditions resulting from climate change and other things affect mental health worldwide. It's becoming an issue.
Oh, okay, okay. So
And
that on more of one is kind of more of a local focus, like here we're experiencing this weather pattern, this kind of has an
yeah,
impact on us. Then the other is more global, that climate change worldwide and impact for individuals. So that's part two, right?
yeah. And part three, have you ever heard of something called a death cafe?
Death Cafe. No.
No, me either. I hadn't, but actually, it's quite a popular method of dealing with grief or loss or trauma. And it's where a group of people get together, and there's no speaker, there's no format. I don't want to give too much away because our third talk will be about that. But the people there talk about what they've gone through and experienced and what they're feeling. And it's just a chance for people to get together and share. They might have a coffee while they're there. And there's a new type of cafe that's come up over the last couple of years, and that's called Eco Grief Cafe.
Hmm.
And so the third talk will be talking about eco grief, what it is, how it affects us. Does it affect us? Is it real? And what are people out there doing about it? And what can we do about it to improve things in our own mental health?
Look at this. Hopeifiers has just gone to a three-part series and like shows organized in advance, not at the seat of our pants right at when we say go live. This is
Yes.
amazing, Scott. Good
Well,
job, brother.
at the request of the acapellist, we're going to be putting out about a month ahead
Woo.
our show schedule for what's upcoming, and we'll be putting out some information for so people can actually plan on what they want to see or look up our shows as we go along. So this is the first step. The next three shows will be as we've discussed, and we'll make sure we get those up on our social media. And going forward, we'll have month in advance schedules for each month we're here.
Oh my goodness. It's going to be so good to be organized on this. Well done, Scott Sweetman. Glad you're with me, brother.
You ask, buddy, and I make it happen. That's
Thank
the
you.
deal. That's the deal. So let's jump into it.
Yes.
We're 4 minutes, 35 seconds in, and we need to get down to brass tacks because there's a lot here. Okay, I am going to be referring to notes because there's a lot of different studies, and I want to keep the facts straight because this is important. I've been diagnosed with SAD. Do you know what SAD is?
Yes, I do. Seasonal affective disorder. Yep. Everybody's
Yes.
got their blue light that you plug in right about now to get a little sunshine inside happening, right?
Yes. It used to be called major depressive disorder with seasonal markers,
Oh,
seasonal something on the end. Yeah. So,
wow.
but yeah, that affects statistically about 20% of the population in North America,
Really?
and 75% of that population is female.
Wow. Huh?
So, um, and that's sort of how we segue into this because we're changing seasons, right? We're heading out of winter, we're firmly into spring, summer's not too far away. And most of us, at least in Alberta, where we're based, those of you who are not in Alberta, look it up on a map. We're in Lethbridge, Alberta. Generally a sunny, warm place to be, but we get wind like nobody's business. Last few days, we've had a lot of wind. And the other night before last, we were sitting in the living room. Maybe you felt it too, Al. Just all of a sudden, everyone grabbed their ears in the house. The pressure dropped so quickly, it was like being in an airplane. And
Really?
everyone, the dogs whined, everyone's ears popped. We all had ringing in our ears. And Fleur went and looked it up, and it had dropped something like 30 points in barometric pressure in seconds.
Wow,
Yeah.
really?
So,
That was last night?
last night or the night before, I don't know, short-term memories, first thing to go.
Wow.
Um,
Oh,
but short-term memory, long-term memory, all of it. But yeah, so Lethbridge, as you know, gets a lot of weather conditions,
mhm.
and we have winter that's interrupted by Chinooks, which is warmer wind conditions, and it can be really windy. And a lot of anecdotal, antecedent talk, people, winter blues. What else do we talk about in terms of weather affecting us?
Well, yeah, certainly that it does. One thing I wanted just to add was as well was, we were talking about the blue lights and SAAD, seasonal affective disorder,
Mhm.
and another thing that kind of ties into that is vitamin D. Hey, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, all the research on vitamin D is if you're at the equator and you're walking around shirtless all day, yeah, you got enough vitamin D. But if you are in southern Alberta, it's impossible for you to get enough vitamin D in the winter, right? So they're saying vitamin D is something that everybody should be supplementing with. So,
The truth is, too, that if you don't have it in your diet, you'll probably get skin cancer before you'll get enough vitamin D from the sun. That's what got my dad. He was a
oh,
farmer, like many people who will see our show or live in the community we live in. And his favorite thing to do, because it was really hot and sunny, and he liked sunshine, is he would work with his shirt off all day.
yeah,
And he ended up with skin cancer on his back that they didn't catch in time, and it spread down into his lymph glands and then into his liver and all sorts of things. So yeah, skin cancer is a big deal. So there's always that kind of fine line, right? Like you got to
sure,
get out into the sun, vitamin D, but you have to be careful that you're not overexposing yourself to sun and the harmful causes
exactly.
of
Yeah,
too much radiation. So yeah, that vitamin D, like Al says. But let's get into it. So I'm going to read you a headline. This sums it up 100%. And it's counterintuitive because, like
okay.
you said, the two people that emailed us or left comments on social media, if you and I went out and asked 100 people, is there a link between weather and your feelings? What would people say?
Yep.
Yeah, I think like 98% of the people would say yes. Science, however, says,
Interesting.
and that yeah, it is. And when you start looking at actual scientific studies and not sort of, gee, it was sunny today, so I felt great. It was rainy today, so I'm grumpy. But actual scientific studies where they look at physical conditions, they look at biological responses to weather. There's some interesting statistics that come out there. So you know what happens at high altitude, right?
I know that oxygen gets thinner. It's real
Mhm.
tough to get enough oxygen in your body, depending on how high up you go, right?
Yeah. Well, you're a perfect example how practicing better health and breathing, like your breathing now is excellent. Like it's rhythmic, it's deep, I wish to eventually breathe as well as you do. And we all need to spend time breathing. But also what happens is the air pressure changes. And we're very susceptible to air pressure. A lot of things in our bodies respond to air pressure, the amount of weight. That's what barometric pressure is, the amount of weight the air above us puts on us. So generally it's measured from sea level. The higher up we go, the less air there is above us, so the less weight there is on us.
I didn't know
Right?
that's what barometric pressure is. That's what barometric pressure is, the amount of weight of air above us.
Yeah, that's a very simplified form of explaining it, but yes,
Okay,
yeah.
better than I had.
So
So thank you.
that's sort of the grade 6 science explanation, but
Apparently, I
that's
missed that class in grade 6. So thanks for getting me up to speed, Scott.
yeah. So you know what our sinuses are. Our skulls are heavy, right?
Right,
And our necks, our evolution must have been really interesting because we have big craniums, and most animals, as you know, don't have as big a craniums as we have, or they have no neck. You know, think of some of the aquatic mammals that have fairly large brains. They don't have a spindly neck that's
right.
holding on. Part of the way we get away with that is we have lightning cuts, if you will. Those of you that shoot will know what those are, other sports where there's hollow places or cavities in our skull. And they believe that's to make it lighter. So those pockets are called our sinuses. So we have, everyone knows the sinuses here, but there's other places in our head where we have holes or deviations that make our head physically lighter. So many of these, like our sinuses, can be filled with fluid, and a lot, like your inner ear has fluid in it. A lot of our systems have fluid in it. So as barometric pressure changes, the pressure on those fluid pockets change. Have you ever been around somebody, and it's happened to me since I've gotten older, where they say, "Oh, a storm's coming," and you
Yeah,
say, "Oh, how do you know that?" "Oh, my
right.
knees hurt," right?
Hmm.
Science says actually they could be right because whether it's a good indicator when barometric pressure rises or falls, whether we're going to have bad or good weather. It's one of the simplest ways that we can forecast weather. And the fluid sacs in our joints are either compressed or expand according to the barometric pressure that we're experiencing. So when the barometric pressure changes, if you've got arthritis, you can feel that fluid expanding or contracting in your joints.
Oh, that's very interesting.
It is.
And
And it gets more interesting than that, in that it doesn't just affect that. Then, if you are a mountain climber, and both of my daughters love climbing, your daughter jumps out of airplanes sometimes, doesn't she?
she has. She has.
Yes, I thought I remember that.
Uh-huh.
And when you get high enough up, you can get something called high altitude D something. Anyway, it's altitude sickness, basically.
Right.
So when you get high up, and they've done a lot of studies on this, and actually brain tissue is like a sponge. If you take a sponge and squeeze it, of course, all the water comes out. And when you let it go again, it expands up to a bigger shape. And they found that tissue in our brains, tissue in other places in our body responds that way to altitude. And so we can actually fill our brain cavity with fluid because we're too high and we're not used to that. Our body has to take time to adjust to that. People who live at those altitudes, lots of indigenous people, their bodies have become used to this and it doesn't affect them. But scientists can actually see and record the swelling of our brain and other tissues according to altitude, the fluid in our joints, as I was talking about. And you can find all of this online. I can put references if somebody wants, or text me if you want to find out where I found all this. And so it's real, is my point. That
Okay, so just
certainly,
Scott, just kind of, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand what you've just told me. So the higher the altitude, the lower the pressure on the fluid in our brain because it's thinner, the air's thinner, correct? And so the
right,
lower pressure, and then the lower the altitude, the higher the pressure would be on those fluids, correct?
right. So we're used to a certain amount of pressure, and it's it's not so simple. So please don't flame me and say, "Oh, what about gravity?" And there's a lot of things at play here, right? Like people in the space station, they have a lot to worry about, gravity. So it's not just air pressure. There's a lot of other things that go into this, but certainly air pressure is something that scientists can measure, and there is a connection to it. There's a great simple article on medicinenet.com on how barometric pressure affects humans. Really simple read, really short, not hard. And it starts out by explaining exactly as I've said, that barometric pressure is also called atmospheric pressure because it's the force of the weight of the air surrounding us puts on our body. Okay. And you've seen the barometer, right, Al? You know, and it's the mercury goes up or down, and the
Right.
reason it goes up or down is because the weight of the air either pushes it down or it doesn't exert so much pressure, and the mercury rises up.
Okay.
Simple. In our bodies, that same process goes on, and so this process at high altitudes, headache, nausea, shortness of breath, tiredness, fatigue, dizziness, and that's sort of at the basic level. And then it progresses from there: coughing, vomiting, confusion, disorientation, really severe things, because it causes the brain, as I said, to a fall in barometric pressure. As you said, when we go up the mountain, there's less weight on us, right? And so it's like our blood vessels dilate, and that's where the headaches come from. And these symptoms are reproduced when the barometric pressure changes when we're here. It's like we've gone up or down a mountain, right? So as the weather changes, especially in a place like Lethbridge where our barometric pressure swings, Chinooks cause rapid barometric pressure changes. The last few days, we've seen a lot of barometric pressure changes up and down and up and down, right?
Yeah.
Are you with me?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So
Hey, let me ask
arthritis
you a
gets,
question about sinuses, though. Like sinuses, the cavities where you can have liquid in them, but they don't necessarily have to have liquid in them, or do they?
no, and again, I'm not a doctor and I don't play one on the internet, but
Okay.
there are spaces in our head that don't have fluid in them, right? Like our brain is surrounded in fluid, our sinuses have fluid in them, but there's like our inner ear. Sorry, I just hit my microphone. Can you still hear me?
Still hear you. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Our ear canal is a space with no fluid in it. There is
Right.
fluid in the I can never pronounce that word. Spelling it is worse. You know what I'm talking about. The
Yeah.
inner ear, the fluid.
Coccygeal or coccygeal or yeah. Okay.
Yeah, whatever that sucker is. But the ear canal itself is a hole in our skull that makes it lighter, and there's
Yeah.
no fluid in it. So
Right.
there's both, right?
Okay. Cool.
So, yeah.
Carry on.
So I'm swollen joints, joint stiffness, all of those things are caused by this same situation. Headaches are a really bad one, and this affects where you live. So migraines or severe headaches are often associated with areas where they have these barometric changes. And when I first moved to Lethbridge, I actually noticed how many people complained of migraines here compared to anywhere else I'd lived. I met a lot of people with migraines, and I wondered, was it something in the food or something in the water or genetic? I don't know what. And during this research, they were pointing a lot to how migraines can be triggered by these changes in barometric pressure. So I'd like to hear from our viewers, if you have migraines, does it get worse when the weather changes like it is now?
Well, and related to that, if in fact that is the case where people are, that triggers migraines because of barometric pressure changes, is
Mhm.
there something that a person who's sensitive to that, can wear or have that would kind of make them immune to those outside barometric changes? You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Is there
and that's very good. And
tinfoil hat?
I don't think the tinfoil hat will work for that. It will work for the radio station broadcasting in my head,
Right.
but I'm not sure it'll help with migraine headaches. And we're not joking to people who suffer from migraine headaches. They're really severe. Like I've seen people completely incapacitated and to the point of suicide from migraine headaches. So we're not joking about that.
No.
Sorry if it came across that way. We weren't. Al and
But
I, like,
if it is barometric change triggered, and if that was the case that you could do something or wear something or have something that would kind of counter that impact, right? Then perhaps
yeah,
you could have prevent the headache.
moving,
Huh?
moving,
Moving?
moving.
Moving?
Yeah, relocating. That was one of the things that did come up in the research. I said that if you suffer a lot from changes in barometric pressure, that one of the things that you can do, not jokingly, is move to an area with a more stable barometric pressure.
Oh, I thought you said moving. I thought you meant like move your body, like
Da, da,
dance or
da, da,
walk or
da.
right now. No,
Yeah,
you're saying
that's good
move
for
to
you
another
too.
place. What's that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, moving is like physical moving is always good for everything, but yeah. Um, And it's interesting because I know that one of the things they prescribe for joint pain is movement. And I didn't come across anything that specifically connected the pain from barometric pressure to movement as a solution. But it did say that changing locations, if the conditions are severe enough, and don't take up mountain climbing.
Mm,
Uh,
okay.
yeah, probably diving, skydiving, or space station life wouldn't be a good choice either. I'm not sure about that. Okay, so let's get back to the crux of what we're talking about. Remember how I said science is so-so on the issue?
I recall.
So common wisdom is that weather affects us. Winter weather is bad, summer weather is good. Storms coming causes pain in old people and dogs. This is common wisdom. Science, however, says, not so. So big studies have been done in the mid like 2015 to 2019-ish. There seems to be a lot of studies during that time. Never really said why, but most of the research in this topic came from that period. So I didn't find anything contradictory newer. So that I think is still valid. Nobody's contradicted that in any big study that I found. So these research tests looked at a group of about 10,000 people. So not small, not giant, but I think fairly relevant. And they tested all sorts of things with these people, physiological, psychological. And one study came out and one study said, yeah, about 60% of the people seem to have an adverse response to weather conditions. Another one came out and said, yeah, no, it's about 50-50. And once you go 50-50, you're in the realm of who knows, right?
There is no
Science doesn't
impact.
deal well
Yeah.
with 50-50, right? They say, nah. But what they did find is when they started drilling down on this information is that of the 50%, there was an extremely high percentage that had real, and I don't want to say imaginary, but quantifiable problems caused by weather.
Okay.
Okay, so the conclusion that they drew from that is that some people seem to be immune to changes in weather,
Okay.
where other people genuinely suffer physiological changes that are uncomfortable due to changes in the weather.
Okay.
So,
So
so they're
you take two
sorry.
people, and one has more sensitivity to it. They're both exposed to the same shitty weather. You do some kind of biological markers on them, and the person has more sensitivity. It's going to show in those markers, kind of thing, where it's not going to
Exactly
show
right.
to the other person. Okay, cool.
Right.
Okay.
And so they said they needed to do further research into that area instead of just saying do people or don't people. The two big studies that I looked at were inconclusive. They both said certainly there's a group that believes or we can show is affected by this, but there's another group that's not. And then once they realized that is a case by case, they said, well, how can we, are there markers for this? Is there a genetic disposition to it? Is it location? What is causing this particular group to be affected so severely like that? I wasn't able to find the follow-up research on that, so I assume that it's still ongoing, or they haven't got grants to do it, or whatever money was available for the research in 2015 to 2019 dried up. I don't know, but I don't have an answer to that. What I did find really interesting was the National Institute of Mental Health is American, and it looked at SAD, seasonal affliction disorder, right? And at that time, it said that only 6% of the population has been officially diagnosed with SAD, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then a 2011 study went back and looked at that, and they said that unequivocally the number is much higher, and that there are, at least 50, if not 60% of the population that are affected by seasonal or weather changing disorders.
Hmm.
What weather do you think would affect people the most?
Weather with no sun. So
No
rain.
sun?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
Mm, well, wind for sure too.
Wind. Okay. Anything else?
That's both. Well, cold, but that's like, cold is easier. You can dress for cold, right? So,
Yeah, exactly. I would have said the same list, and I think most of our listeners would. The truth is the opposite.
what?
Blew me away. The truth is the opposite. So they did a really extensive study in a number of places. Chicago was the biggest one, and they looked at the number of people that went to emergency for mental illness or mental conditions. They looked at the number of violent crimes. They looked at the number of crimes in general. Okay. And they found, in fact, that higher temperature causes more drastic negative effects on the population than cold temperatures and less sunlight.
Hmm.
I was blown away by that.
Okay. Huh.
So
Interesting.
they did say that, of course, winter and cold, most people are inside more. Most
Right.
people can't enjoy the activities that they normally enjoy. Roads are worse, travel's more difficult. Lots of reasons why winter we would think would be worse. But a lot of the research has found that that's cultural. So in Nordic countries, they have a tradition of viewing wintertime as a cozy time, a time
Mm,
for being together inside, a time for intimate relationships, a time for more love, more, of all kinds.
mhm.
Of it's a more of a positive feeling. So
Right.
they accept that winter's coming and they can't, go swimming and sailing and all of those summertime things, but culturally they've replaced it with really positive things about winter,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they don't suffer the same sort of winter blues that cultures without that positive outlook on the winter months has.
That's an interesting observation. It makes me also think of our indigenous, like Blackfoot folks here,
Mhm.
and in the winter, like that'd be when the elders would be telling the stories, right? That's you'd be sharing nappy
Exactly.
stories, and basically the transmission of the culture would occur then more so than in the summer when you're out busy doing stuff all the time, right? So yeah.
Well, and I think that television, and of course, this is no scientific backing, I'm just throwing this out there because I want to, but I think that television has become almost a singular activity. I mean, we sit in the same room, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it's not interactive. It's not like storytelling. It's not like
No.
singing or drum playing or
Right.
carving or learning sewing crafts or weaving or it's not generally interactive. Although some people get very interactive at televised hockey games and things. So wouldn't you agree though?
Yeah.
I think
Makes
that
sense.
yeah, and I think that in our culture, you talk to a lot of people. What do you do in the wintertime? Well, it's terrible outside, so I stay home and I watch TV.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, that's not a positive expectation. And
No.
so these researchers said a lot of problems with seasonal change is our expectations.
Okay.
And so, and they also found when they were looking at this, and we'll talk a little bit more about it when we talk about some of the effects of eco grief, is that like us here in Lethbridge, this time of year, we're frustrated because we've been waiting for summer to come. And the weather is, we had snow a few weeks ago or last week, even a little bit. Summer hasn't come. There's a frustration there, right? It's like Corolla said. She wanted to ride more horses. It's supposed to be nice out, but
Hmm.
the weather's just taking that opportunity away from her. And so the researchers found that there seems to be a really strong correlation about our expectations, going back to cultures that have positive expectations about winter, where they're looking forward to that time from being outside and working so hard to, sharing skills and stories and intimacy and time together inside. They do much better than cultures who see it as a negative time, a lost time.
Sure.
Um,
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
and I would add generational to that, because I remember I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, and he talked a lot about getting ice for the ice house in the winter, and he talked about that was the time. um, Manhood. We lived 16 miles outside of Bentley, and that's where the local train station was. So in the winter time, you had to take a horse and team into Bentley to sell grain, right? And you weren't a man until you could make that trip by yourself. I'm
Mm.
talking about the man box, but that
Yeah.
was the expectations.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they would make a buffalo fur coat because that was the only way you could survive at minus 35, minus 40, out on a buckboard wagon.
Right.
And he still had his buffalo coat, and he showed it to me, and it must have weighed 35 pounds. It was huge, and it went from basically his eyes could see above the collar, and it went right to the ground. And the arms were long, and so basically I think if he fell asleep, this coat would have kept him up. But they made these coats during the winter,
Yeah.
and he talked a lot about how during the winter they couldn't do much outside, and they had all of these things, all of this work. It was kind of fun work, but he looked forward to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he talked about it in a really positive way,
Nice.
where you talk to young people now, and they might be in hockey or something like that, but they still don't really look forward to winter generally.
Hmm.
Not, and I think that it's a time generational thing. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense to me. Yeah. That makes
Yeah.
sense to me. Yeah.
Like you were talking
You
about.
know what? Not even generational, maybe even age. Like when I was a young person, I loved
Mhm.
winter, right? I would
Oh yeah.
go skating, go skiing, go just play in the snow, make snowmen, play hockey, ride snowmobiles,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And then the older I get, the less I like winter appeals to me, right? So my tolerance for good weather has become kind of small now.
But that may be because we don't have a tradition, as you said, with your work with the indigenous communities.
Oh, Scott, I think you muted yourself, bud.
Yeah, sorry, my my mother tried to phone actually, and it came
Oh,
through. I don't know
okay.
why.
Oh, all right. Well,
She's on a because she had no, she had medical problems a couple weeks ago, so she's on an emergency straight through. But she's fine. She'll call Fleur if she can't get through to me if it's an emergency. So we're all good. So as I was saying, I think that part of that is we don't have a role to play, right? Like you and I in the winter, we don't have young people coming to us for stories and
right.
history, and they kind of like, meh, they fight over who has control of the TV remote,
Yeah.
and that's kind of where it ends up. So maybe that's something we should look into, finding more activities to combat that sort of winter blues that we get at times.
Yes.
So yeah, you with me
Nope,
on
that's
that?
good, that's good. Is that kind of it conclude our night our first part here, Scott, or are you still on a roll here and I'm missing?
No, 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 no. I just want to introduce one more thing
Sure.
about what we're talking about here, and before we got off on a little tangent there, it was the research in Chicago about how actually hot weather, there's more violence, there's more
Right.
shootings, there's more people who go to emergency for mental health issues. And they now believe that there's a counter condition to the winter SAD. And there's a lot of people who've not been diagnosed who actually have a condition that when the temperatures get high, and it's more about temperature than sunlight, but when the temperatures get high, they get hyperactive. They
Mm.
feel almost like an animal in a cage.
Oh.
And it can get to the point of being creating psychological delusions, delusions of grandeur, delusions of overability, overconfidence, and they're very much connected with this high temperature. And so
Mm.
they're starting to look at now a segment of the population that in the past have been ignored. Everyone says it's nice out. What's your problem? And these people are genuinely suffering from a condition, a medical condition that affects their psychology and their mental health. And it's the opposite to what most of us think, where we think that it's summer, everyone should be happy. What's wrong with you? Put on a t-shirt, get out there, right? Like
What
for
is
me,
that?
when it
What is that condition called, Scott?
well, it's called SAD,
It is.
because
Okay.
it's the same condition. It's a seasonal affliction disorder,
Okay.
but the conditions and the symptoms are different. And so right now it escapes me. There's an official book that doctors use, and some things not actually. It's like fibromyalgia. For a long
DMS
time,
DMS 5, the Diagnostic Services Manual version 5, I think is what you're talking
thank
about.
you.
Yeah.
That's why you're the acapellist and the boss. um, And if it's not in there, basically doctors can't say you have this and prescribe for it, and that's just how it is. Even if they can see that you're suffering, that's how it is. So they're looking at now that there's a very serious condition here that is affecting people and does affect suicides and does affect violence. And the information that I was looking at said that if you feel any of those things, and I think this is where we're going to end this message for tonight, is that if in the summertime, despite everyone saying it's great out, what's wrong with you, get out there and enjoy yourself. If you find yourself feeling aggressive, if you find yourself feeling hyper, if you find yourself feeling charged, they describe it almost like you've had too much caffeine.
Mm.
Your whole everything is like, I gotta, all of this stuff. And if you find that and you find that you're suffering from it, treat it like any other mental condition. Get help,
Excellent.
right?
Yeah, that's great.
Call
I
211.
didn't know that was a thing that existed, but that's excellent. So thanks for that lesson, Scott.
Yeah, well, I think that I was really sad to see that it was such a severe condition.
Yeah.
People die from it,
Yeah.
and because it hasn't been, the general wisdom says, "Oh no, summer's great. Summer's good for everyone." The truth is, temperature isn't good for everyone. And I think the more open we are to talk about things and talking about mental health, you and I have, that's part of what Hopeifiers is about. Is a couple middle-aged guys with lots of problems get on here and just are honest and talk about what's on our mind. And we hope other people are going to do the same thing. And when I was doing this research, I came across this, and I was first really sad. And I thought, no, hey, I'm going to share this with the acapellist. I'm going to share it with his community. And maybe if there's one person out there that doesn't understand why when summer comes and the temperature gets hot, they start to feel not great.
Yeah,
And,
that point of awareness might be something changes your life, right? If that's you're sensitive that way and you observe that, then maybe you make a change in your plan or you move somewhere too, right? That's not you get to where you're in a more conducive for your health, your makeup, right? So yeah.
and one of the things I've really learned with the stuff I've gone through and my family and you and my other friends is that if you think there's something wrong with you, don't, and you go to your doctor and they say, there's nothing wrong with you, it's all in your head. It might be in your head. And by that I mean that you may have a condition that's affecting you both psychologically and physiologically. And if you really feel that you have a problem, keep talking to people.
Great idea.
And
Hey, Scott.
don't you agree?
Yeah, oh, I do. I don't know if you probably didn't see it, but I did share this. It was an amazing video, I thought, about this woman. She's a doctor, but when she was 30 years old, she developed a really severe rheumatoid arthritis. And so basically what she did is kind of went on a journey, if you will, to say, why am I trying to kill myself? Because that's in effect what an autoimmune disorder is, right? Your
Right.
body
Yeah.
is fighting against yourself. So she kind of went on this journey to, why would I be trying to kill myself here? And basically she kind of came to this traumatic event that happened to her when she was 10 years old, and she was sexually assaulted, and
No.
that kind of caused a framework within her that she wasn't good enough. There was something broken wrong with her, and kind of, I don't know, change her internal chemistry to kind of be more toxic, if you will. So
Mhm.
with that awareness, she addressed the cause of that trauma, and obviously in that process came to the conclusion that she wasn't at fault or at blame in any way. She's a 10-year-old girl, right? So the messaging that there was something wrong with her was obviously wrong. Nothing wrong with her. She was perfect then. She's perfect now. And she's 100% human then. She's 100% human now. Anyways, long and the short of it, cured. No more rheumatoid arthritis, no drugs. Just basically she, found a way to kind of correct that so that toxic flow would not happen for her anymore. So I thought that was an amazing story.
I know, and it's so true, Alan. It's something that we touch on in almost all of our shows, is that, I know when I was a kid growing up, and Disney Pixar has this great character, the giraffe, who's a hypochondriac, and he always, there's always something wrong with him, and he takes
Uh-huh.
pills for everything. And when I was growing up, a hypochondriac was, anyone complained of anything, unless their arm was cut off, they were a hypochondriac,
Yeah,
basically,
yeah,
right?
okay.
Unless there's organs poking out, what's wrong with you? Put on a
Yeah.
happy face, get out there.
Get back on the horse,
And
Abbott.
yes, exactly. That dent in your head just makes you look more interesting. Yeah. um, but it's true. And I think that we're getting to a more open culture. And I know there's a lot of doom and gloom going out there. But I do think that we're getting to the point that people are less afraid to talk about the things that are influencing them. And I think we're getting a little more free, that we don't need to fit in a pigeonhole, that my experience is unique and it's different from your experience. And that doesn't make either of them right or wrong, or one real and one not real. They're all genuine. And I think one of the things that should give people hope is that it's okay to be different. It's okay to have something that you think is wrong that other people don't think is wrong. That doesn't mean that you should ignore it. That doesn't mean that you should just, stiff upper lip and live with it. If you think there's something wrong, reach out to people, and there will be somebody out there that can help you. And
But being different is not being wrong. Being different is fine. Being different is ideal. Being different is unique. We want to see how you are different. So yeah.
being different automatically makes you a member of the Hopeifiers Club. That's,
Heck
that's
yes. We'll send you the certificate if you just want to let us know that.
Send us an email, send us a text, tell us why you're different, and we will send you an official Hopeifiers membership.
Whew.
You bet.
Okay, so
You
Scott,
bet.
next week we're going to talk about climate change and impacts more on a global scale than on more of an individual scale, correct?
Yeah, and specifically, we're going to talk about how all of the media and science and everything that's going on about climate change and its effects are affecting the mental health of our children and young people.
Mm. Mhm.
And boy, once I started opening up that research, cold chills went down my spine. We've
Mm.
just gone through the pandemic, and people have been talking about how that's damaged a generation, and how they didn't have the socialization, and how kids quarantined at home didn't get a chance to go through all of those things that we did as kids. Well, right or wrong, everything that's going on about climate change is affecting adults. Tend to go one way or another. We either believe it and are trying to do something about it, or we don't believe it and just ignore it, right? But young people are really uncertain, and all of the arguing back and forth and this study and that study, this one proves it, that one against it, is causing a lot of issues with young people. And I think that's a great for us to talk about, because there is hope. And that will be our third show, where we talk about what we and they can do to deal with the anxiety and stress caused by eco grief.
Scott, I look forward to the lessons I'm going to learn from you together on the next 2 weeks. So thank you for your time, brother. Keep yourself well, and we will see you
You too,
next
my
week.
friend.
All right.
Take care.